It is a cold winter morning in the 1950s. A city bus is climbing a small, icy hill. The engine roars at the front, right next to the driver, but the back wheels, the ones meant to push the bus forward, spin uselessly on the ice. Passengers step outside into the freezing cold and gather at the back, just to add weight there. Only then does the bus slowly climb the hill. This made engineers ask a simple question: where should a bus engine actually go? The front seems obvious, since that is how trucks and cars are built, but almost every bus maker in the world moved away from that idea. The real story of why is full of danger, smoke, fire, and clever fixes, and it took almost 100 years to solve. Think about a bus like a long seesaw. The two wheels are like the two ends of the seesaw, and the weight of the engine decides which side goes down. In the very first buses, engineers simply copied the design of trucks. They put a heavy engine at the front, right under the driver's seat, and then they connected it to the back wheels using a long spinning metal rod called a drive shaft. This rod ran the full length of the bus, under the floor, spinning thousands of times every minute. A rod spinning that fast is very sensitive. Even a tiny bend or a tiny imbalance can make it shake violently, almost like a skipping rope being swung too hard. This shaking did not stay hidden under the floor. It traveled straight up into the metal frame of the bus, and passengers felt every bit of it in their seats and their feet. In the Soviet Union, one of the earliest bus models, the GAZ-03, built in 1933, suffered badly from this problem. Its body was made of wood covered with thin metal sheets, and the constant shaking from the long drive shaft slowly loosened every bolt and joint. Riding on a rough road felt like sitting inside a giant shaking machine. On steep hills, some of these drive shafts twisted so much that they simply snapped in half with a loud crack. Engineers tried a quick fix. If the shaking rod was the problem, why not remove it completely? So they built buses where the front wheels themselves pulled the bus forward, just like a front-wheel drive car. This solved the shaking, but it created a new and much scarier problem. Picture that seesaw again. When a heavy bus goes up a hill, its weight naturally shifts toward the back, just like a heavy person sitting at one end of a seesaw pushes that end down and lifts the other end up. In a front-wheel drive bus climbing a hill, the front wheels are the ones losing their grip on the road, exactly when they need grip the most, because they are the wheels doing the pulling. The wheels would spin fast in the air or slide on wet ground, while the whole bus slowly slid backward down the hill. Even worse, once the front wheels lost their grip, the driver lost almost all control of steering, because those same wheels were supposed to steer the bus too. This was a dangerous mix, and it did not take long for engineers to realize that pulling from the front was not the answer either. So the industry went back to engines at the front with power sent to the back wheels. But a new problem appeared here too, especially when a bus was not full of passengers. With the heavy engines sitting over the front wheels and fewer people sitting in the back wheels became too light. Light wheels cannot grip a slippery road well. In the cold Ural region of the old Soviet Union, drivers of a bus called the ZIS-8 dealt with this problem constantly during winter. On icy inclines, the back wheels would spin helplessly because they simply did not have enough weight pressing them down. Drivers came up with a clever trick. They would ask passengers to step outside into the cold and gather at the back of the bus, to press it down harder onto the ice. Some drivers even loaded heavy bags of sand into the back storage area, just to add permanent weight. The next idea seemed brilliant on paper. What if the engine was placed flat under the floor, right in the middle of the bus? This would make the drive shaft very short, almost removing the shaking problem, and it would spread the weight evenly across all the wheels. It sounded perfect, until people actually had to sit above it. Imagine sitting on your living room sofa while, just under the floor, a large kitchen stove is running at full power, releasing heat, smoke, and fumes. That is close to what passengers experienced. Every engine burning fuel creates a lot of heat, along with dangerous gases and small drops of hot oil. When this hot engine sits directly under people's feet, protected only by a thin metal cover, trouble becomes only a matter of time. The rubber seals around the engine covers would dry out from the constant heat and shaking, then crack and crumble. The moment a drop of oil or fuel touched the hot exhaust pipe underneath, it created thick, choking smoke. Because of how air moves under a moving vehicle, this smoke often got pulled right back up into the cabin through small gaps in the floor. This exact nightmare happened to many passengers in the Soviet Union during the 1970s, when Hungarian-made Icarus 260 buses, with their flat underfloor engines, became common on city streets. On hot summer days, the cooling fans could not keep up, and people would step off the bus with headaches, feeling sick, with the smell of diesel stuck on their clothes. With the engine clearly unsafe both under the floor and up front, engineers finally decided to push it all the way to the back of the bus, far away from the passengers. This solved the smoke and heat problem inside the cabin, but a completely different danger appeared almost immediately, especially on sharp turns. Try this simple idea in your head. Take a long stick, tie a heavy weight to the very tip of it, and quickly swing the stick side to side. You will feel the heavy weight at the end pulling hard, trying to rip the stick out of your hand. A bus with a heavy engine at the very back behaves in a similar way. On dry roads, this heavy back end actually helps because it presses the driving wheels firmly onto the road. But on a wet or icy turn, that same heavy back end can suddenly swing outward like a pendulum, sliding sideways while the front wheels lose their grip and simply slide forward in a straight line, no matter how much the driver turns the steering wheel. German Mercedes-Benz 0321 city buses from the 1950s faced exactly this issue on the wet cobblestone streets of European cities. At even a small extra bit of speed, the heavy rear end would swing out and the whole bus would spin sideways across narrow streets, frightening pedestrians and damaging roadside barriers. Only very careful and quick driving could prevent a serious accident. Placing the engine so far from the driver created another headache. Sitting close to an engine, the way drivers do in trucks and cars, lets a person feel and hear everything it is doing. Once the engine moved to the back of a long bus, that connection broke. To let the driver still change gears from the front, engineers built a long, complicated chain of metal rods, joints, and levers running the length of the bus floor, often longer than 12 meters, nicknamed the kulisa, or the linkage. Metal expands in summer heat and shrinks in winter cold, and with so many moving joints, the system quickly developed loose play. Drivers often had to guess which gear they were choosing, moving the lever almost blindly, unable to hear the engine over the sound of wind and road noise. A real breakthrough came with a Soviet bus called the Liaz 677, introduced in the late 1960s. Instead of relying on a driver's guesswork through a long metal linkage, this bus used an automatic hydraulic gearbox. Power moved from the engine to the wheels through a special fluid inside a device called a torque converter, working much like two fans facing each other, where one fan spinning makes the other fan spin too, without them ever touching directly. The bus could now shift gears smoothly on its own, freeing the driver from blind guessing and making the ride noticeably smoother for everyone on board. But solving the gear problem uncovered yet another hidden danger, this time related to keeping the engine cool. A moving bus pushes through the air like a giant brick, leaving behind an area of low pressure just behind its flat back wall. This pocket acts like a powerful vacuum cleaner, pulling road dust, dirty spray, and exhaust smoke back around the rear of the bus. The engine's radiator, tucked away in this rear compartment, has no clean forward-facing airflow like a front engine would enjoy, so its cooling fan is forced to pull in this dirty, hot air. Within weeks, the tiny fins inside the radiator would clog with dirt mixed with oil, blocking heat from escaping. The engine would overheat quickly, especially on hills. Drivers of the Soviet LAZ 695 buses, working on the mountain roads of Crimea and the Caucasus, battled this problem all through summer. To cool the engine down, they propped open the rear cover slightly, wedging it with a piece of wood, letting side wind flow into the engine bay. It looked unusual, but it worked. Later, engineers solved this permanently with hydraulic-driven fans that pulled clean air down from the roof of the bus. Just when engineers thought the rear engine problem was fully solved, city planners added a brand new demand. They wanted buses with a completely flat, low floor, easy for elderly passengers, parents with strollers and wheelchair users to step into without climbing any stairs. This was extremely difficult with a straight axle running under the floor, connecting the two rear wheels through a raised metal housing in the middle. The solution was a clever design called a portal axle. Instead of a straight bar connecting the wheels, the axle was bent upward at both ends, almost like an upside-down letter U, letting the main body of the axle sit very close to the ground while the wheels turned through small gearboxes at the outer ends. This solved the low floor problem, but it left almost no space at the back for a large engine lying flat. Engineers responded by standing the engine straight up, fitting it into a tall, narrow compartment tucked into one back corner, an area drivers nicknamed the cupboard. Power now had to travel from this standing engine through an angled drive shaft down to the bent portal axle. This design, refined heavily around the 1990s, finally allowed passengers to step from the sidewalk straight into the bus without a single stair. But squeezing something so heavy into a tight corner, so close to the road, created one final and very serious risk, this time connected to accidents rather than driving conditions. In busy city traffic, one of the most common accidents is a rear collision, where a car or truck fails to stop in time and hits the back of a stopped bus. With an engine at the front of older buses, such a hit usually just crushed an empty back area. But with a heavy engine sitting right at the back, a strong rear impact could send hundreds of kilograms of metal crashing forward like a battering ram, tearing through the rear wall and pushing into the passenger seating area. Worse, such an impact could tear open fuel lines and snap thick electrical cables, creating sparks near leaking fuel and turning the back of the bus into a fire within seconds. To prevent this nightmare, modern engineers redesigned the entire rear structure as a true safety zone. The engine is now bolted down using special breakaway bolts designed to snap apart in a serious crash, letting the engine drop safely downward through guided channels under the bus floor instead of flying forward into the cabin. Automatic fire suppression systems were also added, using heat sensors that detect the very first sign of flame and instantly release carbon dioxide or firefighting powder, putting out fires before the driver even has time to react. After almost 100 years of testing, braking, burning, sliding, and rebuilding, engineers finally proved something important. Moving the engine to the back was not just about reducing noise near the driver or making repairs easier. It was the result of solving one dangerous problem after another, step by step, until the modern bus became one of the safest, quietest, and most comfortable ways for millions of people to travel every single day.